Good morning, ladies. Welcome back to our Synoptic Gospel Study. I apologize. I was supposed to make this video yesterday and I completely forgot. And I woke up this morning and went, I didn't make the video. So I jumped out of bed, made some coffee. I'm going to try to make it before Jonathan wakes up. So let's see how we do today. Now, I'm sorry, I just turned my phone on and it's charging because I need the chart, and because I just turned it on, it's getting all kinds of notifications, so sorry if it makes a lot of noise. Alright, we are on number 50 today on the chart, which is on fasting. Now, this is only found in the Sermon on the Mount in chapter 6 of Matthew, verses 16 to 18. So let's read that. And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Now, remember, as we've been looking the last couple of weeks, Jesus is talking a lot about the kingdom mindset and seeing things from how God wants us to think rather than our normal human actions and reactions to people. So just like our prayer life and our giving life should be about our relationship with God and not about other people seeing us, fasting is the same thing. Now, fasting, of course, is when you do not eat food or some other kind of fast. Like people, especially in the modern day, have made fasting a little bit more fluid or optional in things that you can do. For example, maybe you'll do a Facebook fast and you don't do any Facebook, or you do a media fast and you don't watch any media, or you do a Coca-Cola fast and you don't have any sodas or whatever. Like, there's lots of different ways that people do fasting. Now, a typical biblical fast that we see is, okay, you can bring him. Apparently Jonathan just woke up. So a typical biblical fast is when they would not eat any food. They would drink water, but they would not eat food for a certain amount of time, maybe a day, a 2-day, 3-day fast, in order to be able to focus on the prayers. And the concept that every time you feel hungry, instead of eating, it reminds you to pray. Fasting is a very important practice that God encourages, and it's just like praying and giving. It's something that we should be doing. You know, that Jesus didn't say if you fast, he said when you fast. So like that, the assumption that you would be fasting is there. Now, of course, is this, like anything else, cannot be a legalistic thing to where, oh, I fast so that God will like me. You know, that's not how this works. But fasting, just like everything else, is a way for us to grow in our faith and to deepen our relationship with God by focus. It's really about being still and knowing that he is God. And removing anything that is a distraction. So again, a food fast is very easy to focus on prayer because your body's going to be like, you're hungry. And so in that moment of, well, instead of eating, I'm going to pray, and that constant reminder. But anything that's a habit, like I did a Facebook fast one time, and every time I went to reach for my phone, in that habit of just habitual motion of, oh, it's time to look at that. Instead, I opened my Bible app and read the Bible and prayed. And that taught me a lot about how addicted I was to social media, and also was a very good urge. Instead of social media posts, like looking at Instagram or Facebook, I instead read the Bible and prayed. So, you know, lots of things can be a good fast. So if you can't physically fast due to some kind of a medical issue like diabetes or any of the reasons the doctors say you must eat, you would be very sick if you stopped eating, then there are other ways that you can practice a spiritual fasting. But if you're healthy and able to do a food fast, that's also a really great way to have an amazing day or 2 days of prayer. I've done several different kinds of fasts, food fasts and other kinds of fasts, and they are all about focus and reminder, and just there's an intense feeling spiritually when you say, I'm choosing prayer over food today. Like, I want to be close to Jesus today, and I'm really serious about whatever this thing is I'm praying about, or I just really want to have that close relationship with God today more than other days. So I'm going to take out everything that my body normally tells me to do, and instead I'm going to focus on Christ. Like, it's a beautiful thing, and it's if you've never done it, do it. If you do it, keep practicing it. It's make sure you're doing it in a healthy way if you're doing it more than one day. But that all to say, fasting in itself is a spiritual practice that God expects us to do, just like giving or praying. It's in the way He says that. But there's also some mistakes that we can make when fasting. And one of those is to make sure everybody knows that we are fasting. And Jesus is saying, don't do that. Don't make it obvious that you're fasting. Don't make people pity you. Oh, you're not eating today. I'm so sorry. Or also, don't make them think you're more righteous. Oh, wow, you're not eating today. You are so righteous. Either way, Jesus doesn't want us to be involved in that kind of interpersonal communication about our fasting. Instead, He wants us to have a private fast between us and God, where God knows we're fasting and we know we're fasting, and it's between that way. It's not between people at all. So again, Jesus said, don't be like hypocrites. This is like the third or fourth time He's told us not to be hypocritical. So about giving and about fasting and about prayer, that we shouldn't be doing things for people to see us, but instead we need to do it for our own hearts. Now, He says, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret will reward those. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Now, again, that's, I think, a really, it's a promise that when we fast, we will be rewarded. Like, there is a reward in fasting. There is a spiritual significance to setting aside our dependence on anything other than God. Setting aside our habits, setting aside the things that entertain us or fulfill us, and saying, I'm going to focus on God. So that's a really good thing for us to consider there from that point. Then our second point, thank you. Hello, good morning. Good morning. Okay. How are you today? Our second point is on lay up treasure in heaven. So if you'll look on at verse 19, we'll read that section. Do not lay up for yourselves treasure on earth, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body, so if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be deceived to the one. Be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. That's right. You cannot serve God and money. It's one or the other. Now, this passage is actually also in Luke. So if you jump over the, let's see, what was that passage? Luke 12, verses 33 to 34. All right, let's go look over here at chapter 12. Okay, verses 22 and 24. Chapter 12. Now,
That's not right. Hold on, baby. I need to see my numbers. I need to see the numbers. 50, 51, 12, 33. Okay. 33. Whew. Alright, actually, in this one, if you go to 32, it makes more sense because that's the paragraph. So, fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the needy. Provide yourselves with money bags that do not grow old, with a treasure in the heavens that does not fail, where no thief approaches and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Now, I like the way Luke words this. First he says not to fear, for it's God's pleasure to give us the kingdom. We have to remember that in anything we're focusing on in the kingdom, God is wanting to give us that kingdom mindset and that kingdom reality. And whatever we're giving up on earth, we're getting something in heaven, right? So first he reminds us of that. And then he says, sell your possessions and give to the needy. Provide yourselves with money bags that do not grow old. So when Matthew's passage says that we have to remember that the moth and rust is going to corrupt the things that are here on earth. And so the things in heaven do not go away. No coffee for you. So when we are thinking about treasure and having our treasure in heaven rather than treasure on earth, it's, I think, really important that we define our treasure and also that we are prepared to consider if we are able to admit our dependence on treasure. So let's just start with what is treasure. God says that when we lay up treasures on earth, the moth and rust is going to corrupt it and thieves are going to break through and steal. So he is defining a literal definition of what happens with money and possessions. Anything that you have that piles up and can slowly go away with rust and corruption, and thieves can take it. And that can be your bank account, that can be your television, that can be anything, right? Like our possessions, the things that we think are important, and the money that we have, those things are all things that are going to go away and can disappear. And so instead of feeling like we are secure and that we are rich in those kind of things, he's saying to realize that, and not my coffee, baby, to realize that it is much better to have money bags that cannot grow old, things that will not be destroyed, things that cannot be taken away from us, that there is a treasure that is eternal, and a treasure that we can invest in now that actually will last us forever, rather than treasure that we have to worry about, that we're going to lose, that we're going to buy and then it's going to break and we have to buy again, and just all of this cycle of materialism that we get into. Right? Materialism is bad. So, Jesus is trying to correct that human mindset. You want to say something? Correct the human mindset of the need for treasure and the need for things, and to tell us that it's much better for us to have treasure in heaven. Now, how do we get treasure in heaven? Everything we've talked about with the kingdom is about laying up treasure in heaven, about getting that reward in heaven by living a life that's from a kingdom mindset. So when I'm living for Christ, when I'm giving to others rather than holding my treasure to myself, when I'm not worried about the safety or security that things give me, but instead I can give up everything, like in fasting. I can give it up and say, today it's just me and Jesus in prayer. I don't need anything. I don't need to eat. I don't need my stuff. I don't need Facebook. I don't need to watch television. I don't need any of the things around me that are materialistic that I think I'm dependent on. I can let go of all of it and just be me and Jesus. And when we do that, we realize I don't need all of this stuff. I don't have to have these things to be happy. I have a relationship with Christ. Then that
treasure in heaven is growing. And, he tells us many things that give us reward for treasure in heaven. Most of it is that selfless living where I'm sharing the gospel with others and I'm living for Christ and I'm giving to others. When I'm not living selfishly, but I'm living my life for God and for the good of the people around me, and I'm not hoarding up my materialism, but I'm giving it away, and I'm not thinking about how all my money has to be protected or someone's going to steal it, but instead I'm trusting God. Like, that mentality is an important thing about the kingdom mindset. Now, why in Matthew he explains, he says, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So where's your heart? Is your heart in your stuff? Is your heart in heaven? Now, the way we can test that is what gives you joy. Do you have more joy in counting the things that you have, in looking around your home and saying, wow, look at what I have. I feel secure. I feel safe. I feel happy. Or do you find that your happiness and your security and your joy is in that relationship with Christ and the church? You don't have to be rich to be materialistic and have the wrong mindset either. Someone who is poor can be just as dependent on things to feel secure, and their anxiety and their sense of worth can be completely in the things that they have. Just like a rich person can be completely dependent on the things that they have. The amount of stuff you have does not determine this. It is your mindset. Are you focused on Christ and your joy and your security is in Him? Or is your joy and your security in what your stuff can give you and do for you? If we are honest, it's really easy to depend on the stuff that we have rather than on Christ. And so that's just like all the other points about kingdom mindset. Christ is wanting to correct this human mentality and to make sure that we are living for eternity rather than living for our future or for the moment here. Now, Jesus especially focuses on that when he says, no one can serve two masters. For either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. I mean, just in case we didn't get it, he emphasizes you cannot serve God and money. It's one or the other. So this doesn't mean you cannot have anything. It means you cannot worship it. You cannot depend on it. You cannot find your security or your peace or your joy in it. You either find your joy, your peace, security in God or in your money. It's not in both. So I think it's a good thing in both considering fasting and in treasure in heaven. Can you give up anything for God? Is there anything that you would say, I can't give that up? Is that your food? Give it up for a day, fast, and show yourself that you can actually go and be hungry, and it's okay because you'll be filled by spiritually and experience what that's like. I would encourage everyone to at least have one day of fasting where they actually experience what it's like to be physically hungry but spiritually filled, because that is a really deep connection to God. And I'm not talking about just skipping one meal. That's great for routine fasting, like during the week. You want to have one day where you skip a meal, like you don't have dinner that day, but instead you have a few hours of prayer time or focus. That's great. But I don't mean that. I mean an actual day of fasting. Scriptural fasts were normally 1 day to 3 days. And it's important to have that experience if you physically can. If you can't, then again, find something else to fast from. But if you physically can, having 1 day at least that you have set aside all of your food and are being satisfied by God, that will teach you so much about materialism and you're dependent on things and finding your joy in Christ. Because there's a slavery to things. to where we think we need them, but we're actually being held to them. There's a slavery to food where you just think you can't possibly imagine being hungry because it comes out of fear of being hungry, fear of not having your stuff, fear of not having money. And Jesus says, do not fear. And so a kingdom mindset is to not have fear. That's why Luke again starts with that. Remember, the Father wants to give you the kingdom. He's reminding you, this is the reason, this is the point that we are able to step back from that human drive of wanting money and wanting things and being always filled. Our bank accounts are filled, our homes are filled, our bellies are filled, and instead it is to hunger after righteousness for His name's sake, like we saw in the earlier passage. So, are you serving God? Are you serving money? Are you able to fast mentally? Are you able to say, I can step away from anything that helps me focus on God? Or is it not worth it to you? Is it, I'm not willing to give up anything? Then you're serving the other thing rather than God. So if there's anything in your life that you cannot give up, then you're worshiping it. So let that be a prayer point today, is to say, is there anything in my life that I would not fast or I would not give up? Is there anything that I can have some distance from, and in that time actually experience what it means to lay up treasure in heaven rather than treasure on earth? So again, these kingdom mindsets are often very, very different than our humanity and our normal expectations of life. So I hope that we're all challenged to think from a little bit different perspective. Now, this is Good Friday here in Korea, where we focus on the death of Christ and waiting for His resurrection on Sunday. And it's a good time to focus on what things we can set aside and what things we can fast from as we wait for that Resurrection Sunday that's coming in a couple of days. So I would just challenge you to ask God if there's anything this weekend or during this last part of what we call the Holy Week, if there's anything that you can fast from or can focus on laying up that treasure in heaven rather than on earth, so that we can celebrate Easter Sunday with that renewed passion and renewed focus on what God is doing in our lives. So that's our lesson for this week. And again, sorry that I forgot to give that yesterday, but I hope that it's encouraging for you today and this weekend. And we'll look forward to talking to you again soon. All right, buddy. Say bye. You say bye? Yeah. Okay. There's a good smile. All right, say bye-bye. Oh, bye.